Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you are doing well, staying safe, taking care of those closest to you. I do apologize for the tardiness on this episode. I had this episode recorded before some recent travel I did and was not able to get it ready for the usual Monday release. So we're releasing on a Tuesday next week. But next week, we will be back to a Monday release schedule. So I do apologize for that. To get you into my weekend a little bit, just a weekend of fulfilling like just a lot of childhood dreams, checking off things that most Americans do at some point in their lives. My wife and I went to my wife and I went to Disney and Universal Studios this weekend, and had a really fun time and this is something I've been thinking about a lot because I definitely at a certain point in my life did not understand why people went to Disney. I understood if you had kids, but I did not understand the appeal because to me, Disney was an amusement park like any other amusement park. But after having been to Disney Hollywood and building a lightsaber at Savi's workshop and going to the Magic Kingdom and seeing the fireworks and riding all of these whimsical rides, mostly geared at children, and then also going to Epcot and riding Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, and then going through Spaceship Earth and eating and drinking around the world. Disney theme parks are just generally run better. I haven't been to amusement parks very regularly. I went to in a while when I was in high school. My friend Nick and I went to King's Dominion pretty frequently, and that was really fun, and enjoyable. I've always enjoyed roller coasters, and Cosmic Rewind's a great roller coaster. I really would love to go on more. So that was my understanding of Disney now. It's just they generally, and obviously there's a lot of good and bad that can be said about the corporation, about Disney as a corporation. But I just generally from my time there felt like I understood all the tiny details and things that go into making a day specifically for the people who are doing it to enjoy and to just have the pure focus is fun. I understand why it is this massive cultural behemoth that I can't see fading from relevance in my lifetime, certainly. And compare that to my experience at Universal Studios Orlando, which I really enjoyed, and I enjoyed going through the recently built Harry Potter worlds of Hogsmeade and Diagon Alley. Also, very fortunate to have a cold weather day in Florida, of all places. I had to wear a hat and hoodie, but the really disappointing and just really like self-esteem erasing experience I had at Universal Orlando was attempting to get onto all of these really excellently well done and built roller coasters and not being able to fit into the test seat for a single one, and having to both get off of a line that I have been waiting on for a while in front of a bunch of other people, as well as not fit into a test seat in front of a bunch of strangers, and then sadly lurk off. And this is not, and having done some Googling in the recent past, this is a common thing that happens there. And if this was a weight thing, if I felt like this was purely a weight thing on my part, I would feel a different way about it, because that's something I can control. But I can't control my height and my frame. So I was just very disappointed that all of these, as I grow into my middle age, that there are now things that I used to do that are now are not attainable to me right now, and I don't know if they will. So that's what my weekend has been. But as my demeanor, as my guiding principle here on Between Awesome and Disaster, do not let some disappointments sour or spoil my joy. The same way I would uh, adamantly uh, work against and address a certain type of pervasive cynicism that I definitely very much participated, not even probably, against things that are meant to be joyful, and the intentional souring of joy, because really what that is really an attempt of appearing and feeling superior to make up for one's own insecurities, is to muck on just people who are enjoying things. And I've thought about this a lot more lately, and how I kind of interact with art and things now compared to how I used to, because I was a film student. I was a pretentious film student. I was a pretentious actor at one point. I was a music snob. I was always better about music, but as far as what is considered like good, like what is generally considered good, it's just a very small handful of people who decide that. And to to cast to try to cast to try to diminish somebody's enjoyment of something just because you've taken issue with it for whatever reason, I don't find to be a very rewarding way of approaching living. And that's something I'm actively working on. And that's also why I watch a lot more romantic comedies. That's why I even started watching the Harry Potter movies. I'm now at the point where I'm comfortable enough with myself. I just don't give a shit about things that don't really matter. Every time I see folks getting very particular on about, like, especially when it comes to film criticism and and pop music, I just think you can't do that. That is beyond your abilities, and I know it is. And it's a it's a parasitic relationship where you feed off of that hate, and it's a thing, a concept I had learned recently uh, about called negativity bias, which basically wires your brain to want to seek out uh, negative emotions, and that's why what makes certain video essays on YouTube I personally think so popular, and that's got to be doing something about putting that feeling and emotion uh, out into sites that are easy to interact with, certainly on your phone and in your day to day. So that's my thesis. This is my doctoral thesis. Um, is for today is to find joy. I'm also very excited because I will be weekend of Solocom at the People's Improv Theater is coming up this weekend, which I will be in the booth for on several occasions, and that plays into our talk today, which my guest on the show today is my friend Philip, returning to the show, sketch writer, comedian, joke writer, teacher, all around great human being, and a guy I like spending time with, Mike Bryan. Mike, as I'm sure many of you know, is the castmate of the sketch group I work with, Backdoor Barbecue. And he is going to, not only is Backdoor now, we're going into our our seventh year. We say it in the interview as well. Mike's really branching out in terms of his improv and comedy education, and was really excited to get to sit down and chat with him again, because it had been a few years since he has been on the show, and it was really nice to get to spend some time with my friend and really talk shop in a way that we haven't usually outside of the podcast. So this is something that I think a lot of folks are going to get a lot out of. So I appreciate you all being here. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to listen to more, and I have over 300 episodes of this show available now, everything related to what I do, merch store, Patreon, all that stuff is at awesomedisaster.com. And if you want to help us appease the algorithmic overlords, this is something I learned for anyone else who happens to podcast and listen to this. Ratings and reviews don't do as much as we thought they did. That's something I believed, and it's something that I had seen on the internet for a while. But according to what I read from Apple Podcasts, what makes the most difference is subscribing and listening time. So if you're listening to this on Apple's podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, if you can subscribe and share those links to let other people know this is a cool podcast worth their time, I would be tremendously appreciative. And I thank you for being here. And let's get into it and talk to my friend, Brian Fogerty. I do, yes. I have everybody's name. I have everybody's 15-minute performance slot and then everybody's tech slot as well. So I'm imagining everyone will be sending me all of their assets shortly, and then I'll just download I'm just basically going to bring a hard drive and pop in very early for one tech, and then I think I'm doing tech on Sunday as well, and then all the shows are later in the afternoon. So
gotcha.
It'll be a wild. It'll be a fun week. Have you gone to Solocom just to watch stuff?
I've gone to Solocom. I've had friends and castmates and all that fun stuff go and perform in it. So that's one of those weekends where I am usually the participant or the audience member. If you
Yeah.
I'm a big audience member for that one, but it's fun, and I'm excited about it because I think it's like a dry run, or not dry run. So it's a really awesome festival, but like it's the first pass back into doing festivals,
right? Yeah,
which hasn't been a thing. I think for a while it's just been like, can we just get content up?
Sure.
Let alone let's line up all these performers and all these kind of programs and try to pair people together and things like that. So I'm excited for what's to come. I'm excited to see how it goes. I hope it goes really well. I know a couple folks in it who are all super talented, and I'm very excited to hear about it and check out what I can.
Very cool. Yeah, and we're doing it with like fewer venues than we would have pre-pandemic, which will be, I think it's going to be great. I've always viewed like the New York performance festivals. They're messy and chaotic. It's like Warped Tour. It reminds me of like when I went to Warped Tour a lot. You know, you get up really early morning, you run the schedule, and then you spend a good 20 minutes figuring out the run of your day.
Yes.
But for some reason, I had it in my mind that these were like 1 hour shows, but these are all kind of like shorter shows
for
that
the most
do.
part. Yeah, I mean, even when they had 3 stages at the pit, it was every bit of like 20-ish minute slots, maybe. But it was the vibe was very much, can we pack 4 or 5 folks into one slot, whether it's an hour and a half slot, an hour slot, which is great for, I think, everyone. One, it lets the performer really focus on what they want their show to be and really distill it into its core parts. And the points of festivals, like, I mean, going back to Warped Tour, no one's playing, or few bands are playing 2-hour sets. Really, the idea is like, can we get a bunch of bands playing those 15-20 minute clicks? Because really it's an opportunity for you to show, hey, I have this really cool idea, this really fun show. Either if you're at the phase where it's like, I just got to the first 15 minutes, here it is, here's the idea, or here's the greatest 15 minutes, I've seen both. It's a chance for you to market your show and check out other people's show and really show off all the different folks and talented people that you have over there. So it's always really fun that's what I like a lot about those festivals. New York City Sketch Fest is where I learned so much about how to write sketch comedy and how not to write sketch comedy, and things I really enjoyed and things I would want to deter from. It's just a really good, I mean, with all things creative, it's a lot of it's just subjective in what you like. So when you see that much volume, I was always the person on like all 4 days of that weekend. I was there for hours on end, just with my performer pass, going to every single show I possibly can, and just like checking out what people are doing and seeing it. You're, even with a Solocom thing, you're gonna see characters. You're gonna see like people just doing a character wheel of like, here's 8 to 10 different impressions or something like that. You're gonna have people doing a real storytelling element, or like a mixture of storytelling and stand-up, or some people doing like a one character performance, like more theatrical. So it's really fun to see that mixture, and I know the production team over there is really smart about how they pair people. So I think whatever hour you go to, if I were to guess, you'll see a nice variety of solo acts. So it's not going to feel like, here's this ring of one after the other after the other. It's going to have a nice variety, I'm sure, which will make it really just a fun show to go see.
Oh yeah, like you have so many like different like mediums, and this is something I love. I talk about a lot because I just think it makes sense. Like I started viewing comedy more as like I would view painting, and that they're all different mediums that you
Yes.
can work in, and especially within not just the difference between stand up and storytelling, but storytelling. Like again, you have these like basically a character based show, or you have like a personal storytelling kind of show,
Yeah.
or you have maybe like kind of like an Edinburgh style show,
Yes.
or maybe you have something that's more joke centric. I sort of I dig the sort of like uh, just kind of cornucopia of creativity, and especially because if you're working, you're probably because now that I feel like since the Cree community moved to Austin, like the Pit's becoming my new community.
Yeah.
You have like all these people that you kind of work with in one or two capacities pretty regularly, and then you get to see them doing something completely different.
Yeah, and especially in those types of communities, I think what's really cool right now, which has always kind of been the case, but I think it's more prevalent, is everyone is doing a lot of the different things.
Hmm.
So even when we were casting our show, a lot of the folks are doing improv, stand up, sketch, solo shows, storytelling shows, stand up, whatever it may be. So you get a lot of different points of views, and I think a lot of it just lends to I don't know how to put it. It just I feel like there's a lot more shows right now that bring in rotating cast. There's not as
Hmm.
many like I call them homebody shows where it's like, hey, this is like the same group of people, the same 8 people doing the same thing each month. You still have those. You still have those shows that like have a core group that you want to see every single month, and they're
Yeah.
awesome. But I think I see even those recurring shows, they're bringing in guest performers, and a lot of those guest performers do something different than what they do. So
Hmm.
when you have that network of like, I'm in an improv community, I'm doing an improv show, but I want to have a character opener, or a magician opener, or a stand up opener,
Hmm.
you're working off of that community. So you see a lot of people reflecting their creativity in a lot of different ways, which is always fun to see. I know for us, it's like I see you do improv all the time. Do you want to come do a sketch show? And
Uh
it's
huh.
fun to work with those people in that capacity and play off each other, especially our last cast was very much I call them improv forward people because I think in that spirit of like everyone can
Sure.
really do everything. It's like what's the thing you spend your most time on? So having that improv forward cast do a sketch show was really fun because it was a cast that was awesome at tuning into the audience, which is very much an improv skill. Like
Yeah.
when you don't have a script to play off of, you're gonna play off of how are they responding to what you are doing. That's at least my very baseline improv knowledge. I'm no by no means of improv pro, okay at best, but it's
Better than me, I bet. I haven't done improv in years.
don't set that should not be the bar you set yourself to. um,
We could do a jam sometime.
we could do a
We could
jam. There
just
are
throw caution to the wind. I haven't been, gosh, even like with stand up, I'm just now starting to feel like I could be comfortable like getting up regularly again and being around comedians.
there
We could
are
do that.
there are a smattering of jams all over the place.
Uh huh.
They are just everywhere, which is great. It's a really cool opportunity to see those available for folks to perform in. I
Oh
think
yeah.
that's also what's helped with the community there is just you have all those vehicles to just show up and perform and I think they've done a good job building up a supportive community.
Hmm.
So those are fun places to go and show up and perform. And I know I've been to different sketch mics or jams or whatever it may be where it's like a little bit like this is just the clique and the crew
Hmm.
at different venues where it's like we show up every week. So if you're not coming in, it could sometimes feel a little weird. And I
Yeah.
don't think I've really ever I haven't felt that since coming back post COVID, which has been really nice to see.
Yeah. Everybody's just like so grateful to be able to get on stage again.
And that could be a very large part of it, where it's like once you have something taken away from you,
Hmm.
it changes your perspective a little bit of like how much you value it. And if you're someone
Yeah.
who's like, I don't really care, whatever, this isn't a big deal, you probably aren't coming back anymore. It's like not something you're putting your energy towards. Whereas, the people who are there now, it's like either you came back because it was something that was really important to you and something that you really enjoyed being a part of, or it's something that you've been waiting to get into, and COVID kind of delayed whatever you had going on. I know a
Hmm.
lot of people who's like, I graduated college, In 2020. Okay. Yeah. I have siblings who are in that group too, and
Right. Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
you feel like you were kind of like on skates for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So then the second you had that opportunity to jump in, I know there's a lot of folks that have that hunger of like I saw that kind of get pulled away from me a little bit, and it's you know you see that passion and energy in a lot of the shows. I don't think there's a lot of shows where people are showing up and phoning it in,
Yeah.
which is great. Part of that's like you got one stage at the pit,
Mm-hmm.
and there are more stages coming back, but there's not as many stages as there were. So when you're showing up and doing it, you're I think the folks that are doing it really want to, because you have to work hard to get those opportunities, and you want to do
Mm-hmm.
a really good job with it. And you want to keep getting those opportunities. So
Yeah.
the way to do it is through putting a lot of care into it.
Yeah, like maximizing your quality, because that's it's essentially like a quality based business. Like
Yeah,
the that's something I think about a lot, is just, that's why, like, when I do stand up shows, like, even if it's just like free show, bar show, I'm getting a drink maybe. If I've been asked to do a show, I'm not just showing up and put my name in a bucket. I always try to like really do the best that I can.
yeah.
Like do some stuff I know works, work in a couple new things. It drives me up the wall when I see someone who I know gets maybe a few more shows than I do because of who they know, and they're just kind of like, there's something that right. I'm just like, oh, I want to work harder, work harder, please. But speaking of like different cast members, and I think this is something that you've Backdoor has started, barbecue started doing really well, based on observing it for so many years. Oh, like seven. What are we? We're at seven
We're
now,
gonna
right?
hit 7 in July 2023. So we're in our 6th year
Uh huh.
right now, which
That's
is very weird to think about.
I know. And what's also interesting to me is because, and I do this a lot, where I just assume everyone I do comedy with is kind of around the same age as me. But now that, like, and especially at the pit, like, we're getting to work with, like, we're working with with a lot of Gen Z folks, and a lot of newer folks to comedy, and again in those interdisciplinary swap overs. So like, like in a collaborative sense, like we're probably working with a lot of different comedy sensibilities of what's funny at different points of view, and kind of bring it all together to present on stage.
Yeah, I mean, I think now that we've come back, I think our age, if we're going into just age ranges, I'm pretty sure we've spanned from like 22 to 40 something,
Uh-huh.
43. So very different backgrounds and lifestyles. But I think the way we love to tackle it is just what's funny to you and what's exciting to you, and how do we double click
Mm-hmm.
into that. I think what I really love about our show, and what we've clicked into more and more and more and more, is when we're bringing in the cast member, like the mindset is, what do we think is so awesome about them, because there's always something incredible about them,
Mm-hmm.
and how do we highlight that, and how do we work with them to highlight it in that way. And a lot of it, sometimes it's like someone who's really strong performer improviser, so it's like,
Yeah.
all right, when I'm writing for you, I'm going to give you like the loose confines of a sketch and a character. I'm going to give you like a clear why, a clear point of view,
Mm-hmm.
but play with in that. Like really give yourself. Whereas you're working with someone who's very more of a theatrical background or theater background and is really methodical. Give them
Yeah.
the most precisely written sketch that you possibly can. I think what I've also started to try to do is like when we're in that prelim casting phase or in that writing phase, looking at like really drilling into like what stuff are they putting on social media, or like having Zoom calls with them and saying like what do you like to do, like what excites you on stage, and just
Mm-hmm.
working towards that, as opposed to I have this sketch about a 22-year-old trying to getting in an argument with a 43-year-old, and that's just so perfect because our cast is there, because
Uh-huh.
sometimes it just that's not what's entertaining to those people.
Right.
So I think what I'm always excited about is it also keeps the show new and refreshing, because you have new cast members with new backgrounds and new points of views and new styles.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also trying to match everyone up with like, so that you don't have quote unquote the same style of person doing
Yeah.
the same show, so that everyone also feels really well highlighted and represented, that when you're in a sketch it is for you, and it is something we want you to do and want you to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes it really really fun to write, because you're writing for someone and you're giving them that thing, and then working with them to kind of work around their style. So like a table read, we may bring a character, and say, cool, I have a character named, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
How do I then adjust Alex's deal? Because Alex is like a very boilerplate character to then match, whoever the cast member is in that show. And you start to build it around them. And then all of a sudden, instead of having a sketch with like one funny character and one grounded character, you have a grounded character who has a really clear deal and point of view that also creates really fun entertainment.
Fascinating. So you're not just dropping people into roles that have already been written most of the time. Like you're actually, it sounds like you're like picking people you want to work with, and then like playing to their strengths, and be like, let's work on let's do an idea, or like I got this idea, let's collaborate on that.
From my end, I'm always thinking through the lens of like, now that I know I have this person and I have this, theme or what this kind of direction I want to go,
Mm-hmm.
what are ideas that would really be awesome for that person? Or if we're bringing back like an old sketch, or we're bringing back, an idea, or there's also cases where I haven't really worked with this person too much, and I don't have the chance to really get to know them before table read.
Right.
That's a really key part of our table read, is just getting the sense of like what their style is, what they find funny, what they're digging into, and then in your rewrite really starting to work it towards them. And that's when I start to like text or email and say like, hey, I'm picturing you for this role. There's a couple sketches even in this last show where it's a sketch I did like 5 years ago, and I recast it for table just because I want to listen to it. And the person who was in it completely found a new element to this person. Like it was Ethan in a DJ Dad sketch where he's
I was
like,
thinking maybe it was that sketch.
He flipped that in a totally different direction and found so much more depth in it, because that's like when it's an old sketch where I was writing very gamey stuff at the moment, and it was just like, hey, Dad, who's the DJ on spring break? This is fun. Just do dad jokes and spring break stuff, and it went fine. And I hammed it up when I was performing in it. It was just a very silly, goofy sketch, and all that fun stuff. A very early on sketch, and we played it up, and the audience loved it. But for that one, he literally within table, Ethan just was like, so this guy's in a midlife crisis. All of a sudden, it's just the wide options that we had to then play with this character blew it wide open. It was so much more fun, and it also just added dimension to it, because before it was just like goofy thing 1, goofy thing 2, goofy thing 3, goofy thing 4. Whereas we still had those goofy things, but then he cut it with like this existential crisis for a hot second, and then cut right back into being silly. So it just gave it so much more peaks and valleys for the audience to like laugh at, and it made it more accessible to a wider audience. Because if you're like into that dark humor where it's like, look at this guy just clowning around, but deep down he's like struggling, and you just like kind of laughing at like that realization, because that's a very real thing. So the whole truth and comedy of that. Or if you just want to see a guy do a bunch of dad jokes and then spray water at each other, you have that element too. So that was a really fun one. Whereas like that's just like something we totally adjusted. I didn't even know if the plan was to have him do it or not, but the second he read it and then keyed into that, I was done. I was like, cool, this is now yours to roll with.
Amazing. I kind of relate to that a little bit. Like when I was filling in for you at the not the dress rehearsal, but in one of the like get it on its feet kind of rehearsals.
Yeah.
For the like Gen Z YouTube sketch, I just started to do a British accent for the character's real voice, because because I feel like a lot of hype people on YouTube are vastly different from who they actually are.
Yeah.
Like they're playing a character that's going to work for the algorithm, which is a whole other set of problems that I have with how art is created and discovered today. But I sort of just I like to be just making a choice and rolling with it, and then then kind of getting that feedback.
Yeah.
It's a very fun way to work and make things, because you the sketch people. And I say you sketch people.
Wow. Okay.
Because sketch people, I'm used to hanging out with like dark, troubled, probably vaguely criminally adjacent dark poets. in basements. That was my life for a number of years
as a stand-up, correct?
as a stand-up.
Okay, just
yes.
making sure.
Yes, as a stand-up, not just
you know the internet listens, and I don't want you to get a call to be like, sir,
not just for like lack of things to do or entertainment. That was just like that's kind of what that craft is. What that craft kind of attracts.
Yeah.
But like the sketch comedy people, by the very nature of the medium, everybody is a lot very well adjusted. And is collaborative, and I wonder how that works.
I think it's it comes from the lens of a lot of us do sketch and not other mediums, or not like stand up. I'm sure there's lots of stand ups that do both, but a lot of sketch folks, they like that collaboration and working with people. I know that's a big thing for me. The reason I never really dove too far into the stand up world is I like doing things on stage with other folks and having that team environment. I mean, I grew up playing sports, so that's always just been the kind of key fabric. So when you're working with other people, there's kind of two routes. You can be a pretentious asshole and like make it all about you. You're not going to last long because no one's going to want to do your shows or do shows with you.
Right.
Or you can be collaborative and fun to work with and trying to highlight each other's strengths. I think Paul and I talk about this a lot, where it's like the best compliment I think you can get in sketch or in like comedy in general is that you're fun or easy to work with.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Because I also nowadays that we're on a more cast centric model, and you're producing shows and casting shows and trying to find people, and you're working off of like references and like network and things like that. The first thing, priority one, is can I work with this person and be in a room with this person for 4-ish weeks, 6 or 7 rehearsals, 2 shows? Do I trust this person to be someone who's professional, on time, bring the best version of themselves? And then it starts to get into like, are they funny? Can they write well? What experience do they have? But
yeah,
I know lots of experience. Like I talk with a lot of different folks around the community when we're trading ideas of like who would be good for each other's shows, and folks know our show well enough to know where the good fit is. And I've found really talented people and have gotten the feedback to say like they're really talented, but I don't think they would gel with your show for XYZ reason.
Sure.
So yeah, always having for us, it's always like, can you be collaborative and fun and easy to work with? Because at the end of the day, you need to spend a lot of time with these folks to build a show that you're excited about, or at least enough time with these folks. So if you can't stand being in a room with no windows for 3 hours in a little studio in New York,
of course, yeah,
it's a de facto escape the room. You can't be dealing with people you don't like.
Exactly. In order to escape this room, you must be effortlessly enjoyable and hilarious. Live or die, make your choice
at all times.
Exactly. And that's what I always like about your show. That's probably why I'm still the tech after all this time, is because I like all of you very much.
Yeah.
Like I love that we're friends outside of doing the show too.
Yeah.
I really enjoy that. So I want to ask you about this in kind of like your return to comedy from the depths of the pandemic. I kind of want to know what that was like for you, because I know this return appearance is probably should happen sooner. So I'm sorry about that. But I want to know what that was kind of like coming back for you when shows, what that looked like when the pit started like reopening, and what was happening, because you're like really deep into the community now, from what I can tell.
Yeah, that it happened in a kind of unexpected way. So pre-pandemic, I took a break because I was kind of cooked. So I think our last show was February 2020, and I actually stepped away for that one for a variety of reasons. But I was kind of done, and I was also at a place where we've been doing the show for a while, and I just was questioning if it was something I really wanted to do. I think the community now is awesome. I think the community pre-COVID, it was very hard to suss out like what people wanted from you and for what reason. And
Sure.
I think COVID really blew a lid off of that, where all of a sudden there's a lot of people who you're talking to regularly that just went radio silent. And some were for very valid reasons, and then others were just like, "Oh, okay, you were just kind of gaming me a little bit," because for some, like I think our show is awesome. I don't think it's something that you have to play being nice to me about, but like that started to put a wear on me, especially because like I was at a part of my life where I was traveling a lot and like it just not around, and all of a sudden like people you would talk to a lot, because you're not physically there, all of a sudden you're starting to like dissolve from their life and you're trying to reach out and talk to them and things like that, and just it was just a very weird vibe, and that could have been a number of things, but it just, from my perspective, it just didn't it didn't feel right to me.
I know exactly what you mean. It kind of feels like gross,
yeah,
like transactional. Like you get into comedy to like because it's fun and you like doing stuff with people, and then suddenly you just sort of feel like feels transactional.
Exactly. Like that is the perfect word. Yes, it felt very transactional in some cases, and like I also fully understand and get that. But for me, this is like something that's still comes from a place of like passion and interest.
Yeah.
So I don't really need to introduce, or I need nor want to introduce that transactional element to my life or my shows. I think in a world in which you're trying to build an empire or like really trying to like crack into it, sometimes that's just a necessary evil. And there was a point in my comedy, cycle, if you will, that it was very transactional like that, and that's totally fine. But if you call it, if you're kind of on a parallel with that's what this is, cool. So I was definitely cooked, and also part of that was just like my career in life at the time was very not fun. I was never in New York and working a lot and wasn't really excited or passionate about my job. So
yeah, I remember you doing a lot of business travel at the time.
It was you live to have a suitcase, and that then that creates a lot of angst as well, because you're then getting off a plane to go to a rehearsal, because that's the one free night you have to do rehearsal before the weekend.
Yeah.
Unless you want to do all your writing over the weekend. So it just starts like detract from like the enjoyment of it all.
Sure. So and what was your job at the time? Like sales or
consulting?
Consulting.
Yes.
So a Willy Loman-esque kind of existence.
Yes.
On top of this thing that doesn't yield a ton of monetary return, but requires a lot of time and passion.
Especially when it's coming from a place of passion. I mean, you know how I operate. I care about putting out a good product and show, and I want it to be really well thought out, especially when you're bringing people in who are giving their time and energy to it. I want it to be a really fun experience.
Yeah, because you're a considerate guy, Mike.
I try. But you're burning your candle at the both ends, and when that happens, you naturally get just tired and irritable and just kind of just sick of it, and add that layer of like, all right, what does everyone want from me, and why, and is this genuine and authentic or not?
Yeah.
So I was very much just like, I'm done. I missed a bunch of other personal things going on at that point in time in my life where I was just like, I am just done.
Yeah.
February 2020, I'm going to take a 1.5 month break, and I'll be back in April 2020. It'll be fine.
Oh, what? We were so naive.
Plot twist. For those who are listening who don't know, some stuff happened.
Yeah, if you're listening to this in the future, in the next pandemic, there was another one.
There was one in 2020. So for those of you listening in 2026, that's a bad joke. That math isn't. That's too early. But anyway, but yeah. So I saw stuff coming back, and during COVID, I used it as an opportunity to do a lot of stuff creatively that I wanted to do for so long, but just couldn't, because I didn't have the capacity between work life, doing shows. So I started to learn how to do pilot writing and spec script writing. I did a lot of work over at the Second City, because all of a sudden those classes in Chicago and LA immediately became accessible, and that network of writing became accessible. So did a lot of like non-sketch writing for a very, very, very long time. Did acting classes and just getting my performance up, things like that. Like, because all those things just became so easily accessible, because hop on a Zoom for 2 hours and meet all these people. And it was more just an opportunity for me to like go back, take a step back and go, what am I interested in? And the pit opened long before I was showing up there.
Yeah, I feel kind of the same way with me.
There was a lot of improv jams and classes. I think I even went to a show in like August of 2021, and I still hadn't come back for a while. But I forget how the sequence of events worked. It pretty much like it was either going to that August show or like some point thereafter, and that was like my first like return to that world and that venue. And in all genuineness, I don't know. Someone could check me on that. But in all honesty, I just want to go because I know it was an old school sketch show. I knew the producers. They're good friends of mine, Sean and Slaney and Jane, and I just wanted to go support them. It was their first one back. It was a big deal for them. It was their first, and it's also, I'm pretty sure, the first sketch show back since the pandemic. I think it was just doing a lot of like improv jams and and shows like little smaller shows, from my understanding. So it was a good chance just to like see people I hadn't seen in a while. And at some point thereafter, Sean started to get into my ear of like, you should come back. And he knew very well, him and I are rather close, and he knew all of my thoughts and opinions on everything. And he kept on kind of hitting me as like, it's different, I promise. The community's different, I promise. You should come. And then I think he got me to go to like, I think a March old school or something. I started to get to see and meet the people, and then checked out another show or two. And it didn't really like move my thermometer too much in terms of how I was feeling. I was like, this is great. I'm really excited that you guys have this. I just don't want to come back.
Yeah.
So he finally was like, here's this show in April. I think someone dropped out. He's like, I kind of need someone. He could have been lying. I don't know. Because it's very early. It was like a month and a half in advance. So it didn't seem like a very genuine, like someone really dropped out. But he's like, I think you would really like it. By the way, I'm going to be directing.
An olive branch.
So he's like, me and Slaney are directing. I think you're going to really like it. We have a lot of like mix of new people. It's not a lot of, there's really no OGs, if you will. He's like, it's no old guard people. It's just new folks who are really excited about doing shows, and I think it'd be a good fit. And yeah, did that show and met people I still work with today on a number of different shows, and folks who have rolled through our cast, and jumped into it. It was really just a fun experience. And I think because I came through a place of just like, I'm just here to enjoy it at this point. I just want to have fun, and I'm not worried about having to answer to a producer of why my ticket sales are going one way or the other, and then getting pulled in the other direction of like, creatively, how is this working for the whole cast? And we were juggling a lot of different balls at the time, and there were 3 stages, and you were kind of just like fighting tooth and nail for every little thing. That also became really exhausting. So it's just fun to just do it, and my job was to show up and enjoy myself, and that was it, and not have to worry about lighting cues or anything like that. It was just show up, be a writer, performer. And I think I probably wrote some of my best stuff and performed my best stuff. Hands down, did my best ever, I'll do quotes, improv set, because I got a 5-minute preparation period, because that's how the show works. But probably one of my best improv sets I've ever done with Zach. I think his last name is Watson. I'm so upset that I messed that up. I'm pretty sure it's Zach Watson. Because of the Jets quarterback thing, my brain went Zach Wilson. So I hope, sorry Zach, if you're listening to this. But it was just such a fun cast and such a fun experience. And I was like, cool, I'm glad I got to do that. And I again didn't really like go, let me jump back in. And then in June, they had me come back and direct, and that was like a true like week before dropout. And that got me a really good look at all the different people coming in, because I worked with, it was every single person's first old school in that show. So it was very much a quote unquote blank canvas. It wasn't everyone's first sketch show. They were so super experienced and incredibly talented, but it was everyone's first old school. And it was my first time directing old school, so it was this really fun new energy. And after that show, that's when Matt Prigi, who is the AD, still is the AD, over there, kind of started to go, would you want to bring Backdoor Barbecue back for a show? We're at a phase right now where we're trying to like build up our content pool, and it's a really good time to get in. And at that point, Chris and Paul had either seen both shows or one or the other, and they were chomping at the bit. So when they caught wind of that offer being extended, they were pretty keen on coming back. So we went back to the drawing board, took a nice hard look at like things we were doing pre-COVID that worked, and also a lot of the stuff that wasn't working. I think it was just we had a really good process. It was just a slog. It was a lot of work to do that show, and it still is a good amount of work. So we kind of honed in on what we wanted the process to look like and be, and where we were, feeling less excited about things pre-COVID, and it started to click. And then we had our first show, and we had a sellout, and that was great. And then I think after that we started to do 2 per run, like so 2 shows every other month as opposed to doing a monthly show, and that started to click really well. And the cast and the whole gang really seemed to like that, so it just started to carry itself where we felt like we were checking a lot of boxes creatively and productively that we were really happy with. So that's been like the kind of the turn. And then since then, I just being around a lot of those folks from those first few old schools is where I see them at different shows, and they're around checking out everything and supporting each other, and it's been really fun, and it's kind of opened a couple doors for me to do some other projects, which has been really cool. And I think it'll continue to open some doors, which will be really exciting.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about that too. But I didn't know you were taking like pilot writing and acting classes.
Oh yeah,
let's talk about that a little bit. I'd love to start with the acting classes because that's I took years of acting classes. I studied acting. I'm curious, were these all at the Pit or were these somewhere else?
This was through a mixture of Second City as well as then the teacher I took at Second City. She offered other classes. Her name's Audrey Flegel. She's based in California, and she was the structure of the Second City class was very much here's your assignment and here's some examples, and upload like a self-tape, if you will, of the different assignments. And the class I decided to take, because I thought it was most transferable to sketch, was it was like genre based. So like each week was a different genre. So what's a procedural? When you're doing a procedural, what are some of those tactics that you have when you're doing
procedural, like a Law and Order kind of show
type deal?
So you would basically be like reading lines like you're a cop or a criminal.
Yeah, she would give you like a selection of like scripts. So it's like pick one or the other and then deliver it. So here's a something more dramatic. Here's something more clown based, if you will. And then I got a lot out of it. I think it helped me it helped me with how I thought through writing as well. So like writing a script through an actor's lens, I think, is a really valuable tool to have, because you're going to understand what they're going to be looking for and where the gaps in your character development or your character point of view could be. Yeah, which is always something I'm a very premise and game based writer. So I just go, the person's gonna be person one, who person one does this, person two does this, and really learning how an actor will translate that, good, bad, or indifferently, has helped me a lot with being a little bit more intentional with my writing, which then transferred when we brought in all these cast members, gearing towards them, because you're adding that layer of how will an actor interpret this, how will this actor interpret this, was like a really fun thing to kind of layer on as I built that skill set. And then it also transferred into like Zoom classes where you're doing like Zoom reads, so you're having someone on book and then you're acting towards the Zoom camera and getting like live feedback and things like that. So that was another class I took with her, which was really great.
And to distinguish this style of writing, which I feel is like more like motivation based, like which is all that classic actor training stuff.
Yep.
Like Stanislavski, Uta Hagen, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas compared to like premise and game, that would essentially be could you give me an example of what premise and game would be like compared to like another sketch we've done?
Well,
or
I think they can bleed together, and I think that's what I started to learn is you can have a really fun sketch that it's a game sketch. So for example, what's a good example of a game sketch that we've done recently? Well, I mean, it's kind of goes back to what we were talking about, like with the DJ Dad sketch.
Okay.
It's a game sketch, and when I performed it very blanketly, the game was still funny, and it had a pattern, and it checked all the boxes. But like, I could easily name the character Mom, Dad, Child.
Right.
And the game will hit. Whereas when you start to like, you can find an intention in the character a little bit more, and that'll just the moves will heighten on the script, right? So like when we're doing a DJ Dad sketch, you're gonna have
The game is that his daughter can't go to spring break, so we're going to do spring break things in
Spring
the
break
house
at home with dad. Like what happens in that scenario?
Yes, and then
you can do all those whats.
Exactly. So you just kind of like plot out like, what if he did this? What if we did that? And then the other side of it, and please correct me if I'm wrong. The other side of it becomes like the why question.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was gonna say. Where it's like a game. You can have a game sketch where, I mean, going into any improv book or bucket or whatever. If this, then what? So what I think I started to feel, and this is just my own 2 cents on how this stuff works. If this, then what, and why is, that why can start to add like an emotional attachment to these characters, and I think that's also helped really with how our show runs, in that we bring a lot of characters back. So if you give them a reason why, all of a sudden you kind of build a slight attachment to the characters. And I think also when you move on from sketch and into like long form writing, like TV and spec scripts and things like that, you do need to know these motivations. Even though a sitcom scene is effectively a short sketch, you need to understand why the characters are doing these things and what are their motivations. And it could be spoken or it could be unspoken, but when you're pushing through that lens, it changes it from a sketch caricature to a sketch performer or a sketch actual character that you want to know and see and learn more about, and come to love and hate and have whatever emotion towards.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Like basically, and you can kind of like they've developed that character becomes like a person instead of just like like you were saying, like basically a sketch of traits.
Exactly.
More or less. Fascinating. So that's an interesting way of approaching writing, because I swear someday I'm gonna get this screenplay written. But you basically like you start writing around like a character, and this is like I love romantic comedies and indie films for this reason.
Yeah.
You basically write around a character, and then like you kind of game out, well, what are they like, how they react to things, and then what situation are they in, and how do they confront that?
Yes.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I was just doing. I substitute taught for a sketch class a couple weeks ago, and their assignment that they had brought in was weekend update characters, and that was like the big theme when you start to like look at the characters who just felt really polished off, as they all had that point of empathy. So there, I forget the 4 buckets. I always have to look them up because again, I'm not a character writer. I'm not a character forward writer.
Sure.
But what's that? What is their flaw? What's their point of empathy? What's their game? And what's their like point of view of the world? So seeing some of these characters back to back to back to back to back, you immediately like it was very fun to be able to pick out and say like, this character is really funny, but you need to give them a why. I think I wrote even like I also think having that purpose or that why helps ground even your most chaotic characters. I think in one sketch I wrote for our last show, I had these 2 characters that were absolutely off the rails, and they built out this ridiculous story down to like doing crack with John Stamos, like that. Okay. That's where we got. But it was like, why are they doing this, or why are they telling their RA this?
And because they want to get in trouble.
Because they want to get in trouble because they love the building so much and they want to see the RA office.
Right.
There's a reason why. It's it's a bananas stupid reason why, but there's a motivation behind it. So what that then helps, and I don't want to speak for them because they did an amazing job making it their own, but what I was trying to key in on is the reason you're getting more and more and more and more and more and more intense and crazy and building out what seems to be this fabricated lie is because your desperation to see every part of the building because we love it so much just explains why you're doing this and why you're so desperate to get in trouble and get written up for doing hard drugs and hooking up with Jay Coulier. It just like I think that helped give me a direction when we're building out this sketch, because otherwise it's just like 2 people doing ridiculously crazy things, which could be funny, but you don't really care about them when you bring them back. It's like, oh god, what are they gonna do now? And then all of a sudden they get their resolution, and then their response to it's really fun.
Absolutely. And I'm curious how this kind of, because I feel like this could probably translate into pilot writing as well.
Oh yeah.
And I would love to distinguish a little bit between writing a pilot versus writing a episode of a series. So what are you trying to what specific things are you trying to accomplish in a pilot?
So I will caveat this that I am not the best person to answer this, but I can give my best crack because I'm still figuring that out.
Well, great. Well, I'll figure it out here with you.
I mean, from my recollection, some of the key things are you want to establish what's the format of the show. So what are your A line, B line, C line? So like, what's the structure going to look like?
Mm-hmm.
Who are the key characters and where are they at in life?
All right.
A lot of that why today and what conflict are they going to run into?
Mm-hmm.
Also, like really, I want to say something to the tune of like, what does their day look like? But that's kind of like goes back to the structure of like, what am I going to see each and every show, and what you have to kind of then tip off of like what's to come next.
Uh-huh.
The hardest part, in my point of view, is when you're writing a pilot, you probably watched a lot of TVs. You probably watched a lot of sitcoms or whatever it may be, and you have this idea of, Michael Scott from The Office, or you have this idea,
or the gang from It's Always Sunny,
or you have the gang from It's Always Sunny, and you're like, this is where they need to be, and you want to jam all of that into your pilot. Then your pilot is about 3,000 pages long and way too much explanation.
Sure.
And you're trying to get every little thing in. So really, it does, like, the biggest note I kept on getting was like, it's really just down to the parts. Like, what is the show? What is the problem? What's to come? What is each character's deal? And trying to reflect why the interaction between the characters is something that can create a lot of comedy. Why are the characters so different from each other, but when you put them together, it creates something really engaging? That's it. If you look at all the pilots from your favorite shows and you just write down what you learned from that character or that show, it's going to be like nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be absolutely nothing.
Like it seems very simple, like when you really break it down.
And it's the hardest thing because it's supposed to be so simple, and you have this mindset of, but in the dinner party scene, they did all this stuff. And it's like, that was a build. You got to look at episode 1, which most people go, yeah, I hated that one. It's like, yeah, because it was like you got just the greatest hits of what the show is going to look like and feel like. So that's, I mean, it's still something. It's really fun. It's a lot of work to build it out. But it's really interesting, and also going back to like building character, like when you build the what and the why, like that really starts to get you into TV character land, because a lot of TV is, well, do I care about these characters and where they're going in life?
Right.
You want to root for them, you want to boo against them, whatever it may be, but do you have an emotional reaction to them?
Can we game out this with a pilot idea I had a number of years ago? Just because I don't do that, I don't do this kind of stuff very often on the show, but I feel like because we're friends, we can have something slightly interactive. Okay, so I'm gonna pitch you, and then like you ask me questions. We'll kind of apply what we're talking about a little bit. So the pilot I wrote years ago was based on my life as the doorman at a comedy club.
Okay.
The central character based on me is a struggling stand-up comedian who wants to become successful, and the way he wants to do it is by getting in at this comedy club, and he thinks being a successful comic will make him happy.
Yep.
The other people involved, we have his friend, the bartender, who has the ability to drink copiously and never appear intoxicated. She also doesn't find anybody particularly funny. That was my kind of quirk for her. And then you have the idiot manager who gets a lot more opportunities than our deserving central character. And your basically in betweens are based on real things that happened to me while I was working at that job. By the end of our first season, a particular show has devolved into complete chaos. My character snaps and holds an audience hostage and finally gets to perform on stage because the manager, who's also a performer, has not let him perform on stage. And he basically performs a comedy show in like the equivalent of a bank robbery. And then through a technicality only gets sent to a mental hospital. And that's the end of our season 1.
So what's in the pilot, what's like the inciting event of that day? Because it sounds like most of the episodes would happen within the confines of that club.
Yes.
Maybe occasional remote. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
You have some characters. I think my questions would be like, let's get more specific about what those characters are and how they feel about each other.
Okay.
And then also with the pilot, what happened that day? So, like, to be honest, when you say snaps and performs at gunpoint, that could be the end of a pilot. I think the question is like what I think a lot of that's going to come from what does the main character, so the bouncer character or the doorman bouncer.
They were kind of the same functions.
Okay.
They were similar.
What's the door man characters want, and what do they want out of life? What are their goals? What are their visions? Is their goal to be a famous stand-up? Is there like where does that journey go for them? And then what's keeping them away from that? So how do we introduce that conflict, and what's keeping them away? Is it a bad relationship? Is it just not getting a crack? So what something that you said that was really interesting to me that I feel like can create a lot of tension is the consistent that you work at a club but you can't get a spot.
Yes.
Why is that happening? Is it what from the other character's point of view or your own character point of view? Is it that like is it from a tentative point of view where it's like, well, I don't want to rock the boat? Is it just because the guy's an asshole? Like, what is it? So to me, that's what I would be curious about. And then also going back with pilot, it's similar to sketch where it's just like, why today? What is going on today? Did a new character start? Did that kind of thing?
Okay. Well, the answer to that question I had was, and for this particular one, the headliner is delayed, and the show can't continue and can't end until they get there. They're stuck on the train, which is a thing that really happened. And it got to the point where the host has essentially been on stage for 20 minutes and has run out of all of their material, and the crowd is getting restless. So it's at the point where, okay, out of desperation, the manager's like, okay, you can go on, because our main character wants to be a professional stand-up comedian, and they're about to get this chance by performing at this club, and then the headliner shows up right as they're about to go on, and that's our first frustration.
So what I would say is that probably would have to happen within like the first act. Like the why today or the conflict is usually something that you introduced really early on. So for example, in Superstore, Jonas starting at the Superstore at Cloud 9 is the new thing that throws things into that. I guess it's more of like, what's our port key into the world?
Okay.
And that if you go through any particular sitcom, you'll probably see that, where it's all of a sudden a new character introduction, a new issue introduction, or something like that.
Okay.
So that's what I'd be curious more about. And then also, what does episode 2 and 3 look like? And I think the trick is, what does each episode look like on its own? Because I think what we were talking about is an awesome series arc.
Yes.
But what do I see every single episode?
Gotcha.
Just conceptually. Like, it doesn't it's not like here's the plot of every single episode, but in Superstore, someone's gonna introduce a new product or initiative by Cloud9, and the characters are gonna react to it. Then there's gonna be a beeline of just some relationship scene between two characters that gets carried throughout. And there's probably some emotional relationship on your beeline. You can usually see, like, that's just like very general template-y type things. And I'm making this sound so much easier than it actually is, because if you look at anything I've tried to write, it hits none of these things. So just a caveat, I am by no means a pro.
Well, you're fooling me, because you're helping me think of questions that like, because when I write, I always had this problem when I was in school too, is like I always write with thinking that the person I'm writing for has the information I have.
Yes, and that's the biggest trouble with the pilot, is how do you convey it's 2 points. It's one, what is the essential information for the first episode? Because all that information in your head is probably something you unpack throughout 1, 2, 3, 4 series or seasons. And then how do I convey that essential information through the script? Like, one of my favorite this was also when I was really like learning these things and like being really studious with it. I've lost a couple of things along the way, so I'll put an asterisk next to that again. But one of my favorite pilot openings, I think it was like probably the first 3 minutes, is Community. I don't know
Oh
if you
yeah,
ever,
I love that show.
you can probably figure out most of those characters' deals within the first 3 minutes.
Yeah, because the way the dean's giving the announcement and it cuts to each person as he's giving the like losers college, you're at this, you're at that,
Yep.
and you literally like, oh, and you're like, oh, okay, now I know, I have a baseline understanding of this ensemble cast, and then you learn a little bit more about like Winger, and then you learn, and then that's how the study group gets set up,
Exactly.
and that's kind of like the inciting incident is basically I don't have a real degree. I don't have a degree that will let me practice law in the States. I have to get one. I also like this blonde lady. So I'm going to pretend that I know what I'm doing, and then I'm going to get foiled. And now we've established a format where we all get, our cast gets together regularly.
Yeah, and you can learn a lot about like Abed in that first minute. You learn a lot about Abed and then Joel McHale's character just in the interaction where he's like just straight up not listening and Abed is just socially awkward, ripping off a word a minute. Joel's McHale is checking out Britta, and all of a sudden you get like, oh, he's kind of like kind of slimy, and then you learn more about him. He's like, oh yeah, I just need this fake law degree really quick just to get the validation, and then all of a sudden we learn he has to actually go to community college, and that's your kind of like why today of it all, because all of the rest of them have probably lived in that world for a while.
Mm-hmm. So applying this to me, to my idea, basically is probably the why is going to be like, why does he choose to work at this particular club?
Yeah.
Why does he identify this as the path through?
Yeah. It can also be like, is it their first day? Like that's sometimes like the simplest answer, but it could be the right answer. And then that character is the vehicle that we learn a lot through. And then you have like some of the wily vets and things like that. And how do those characters react to this first ever person? Are they like, seriously, you're just the bartender, or not the bartender, the bouncer, or I think that could be fun, is like just what's the vehicle to get us into the world, and what do we then see once we're in it. And it's really just the only thing we want to see is just all the key stuff of all the key character traits, the key character interactions, the love hates, what have you, and what that informs the audience about the world and the people. Yeah,
Fascinating. I appreciate this because I like doing this kind of stuff. This is really fun. And when it comes to like acting classes, like could you ever see yourself like outside of like sketch and improv? Could you ever see yourself like doing like on like web series or like film acting, or like a short play, or like you could do like a 2-person play?
I mean, at this point, I'm open to anything. I would definitely be open to doing it. I think there's a comfort in doing sketch acting where, it's like doing sketch comedy or sketch songwriting as well, where it's like it doesn't have to be really good because it can be comedically okay.
Sure.
But I'd be comfortable trying it and going after it. I think there's a lot of core concepts that apply across the board, especially like the more I've thought about the characters, like even though they're just kind of very big dumb characters I'm doing on stage, there's still like an intention and a purpose. So if you just peel away the comedic element to that, you can give them like layers.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's creates really interesting and memorable people that like not everyone is just like sometimes people are Darth Vader, but then even you learn eventually, well, Darth Vader wasn't always Darth Vader.
Yeah.
He became Darth Vader for a couple of reasons, and there was a struggle, and then he dies as not Darth Vader. Spoiler alert! If you,
I was gonna say, I don't know, George Lucas is gonna be pissed, but
I know, really burning into that Disney Plus Return the Jedi streaming revenue. Awesome, man. And the other thing I want to ask you, because you're also you mentioned teaching a little bit. You're going to start. You're teaching a late night comedy, like like Seth Meyers, James Corden, like Tonight Show. style class, like
Yeah.
writing for late night TV. So I want to talk a little bit about that as well, because
Yeah.
my comedian brain is like, oh, but because I know Mike writes jokes, but does Mike? I've never seen Mike do stand up. Like, for some reason, there's always that disconnect in my brain. It's like, is he going to be? Is he going to be okay? So I'm curious. I want to ask you, and I know you will be.
I was gonna say I don't know. I don't think I have the answer to that yet because I'm asking those same questions. But
So I would love to ask, like, how do you approach like joke writing specifically in that format compared to like if you were just gonna go on stage and tell jokes as a stand-up comic?
well, I think there's a lot of parallels. I
For sure.
think the concept of a monologue joke is always going to be a headline. It's going to be an angle. It's going to be a punchline. So I think the
Yep.
biggest difference between stand up and late night style jokes is just where that setup or that inspiration comes from.
Uh-huh.
And I don't even think it has to be like different. I think the way I approach it is, I mean, because my wheelhouse is comedy news, I'm always working
Mhm.
off of a headline. I think what's been really interesting is unpacking how I get there because
Mhm.
I've been doing my segment in Backdoor Barbecue for 6.5 years. It was literally in the first ever show. So
Yeah.
nowadays, if I'm honestly, I'm going through pulling a bunch of headlines and just kind of staring them down for a little bit and just playing with different ideas in my head and what's ironic or what's interesting to me or what's funny to me. But that's just a byproduct of working a lot of muscles for a long time. So for me, um, I've been building out like a curriculum that kind of unpacks. There's also like a good couple of books that I learned from, so kind of been going back to those
Uh-huh.
for a while and saying, all right, how did I learn this fundamentally? How did I learn this from Michael McCarthy? How did I learn this from Joe Toplin? How did I learn this from Scott Dickers? I'm watching Weekend Update. What are things that are coming out as interesting to me, and how do I distill those into parts that are interesting to a class? So going through like different things, like all right, when you're pulling headlines, just going back to the basics of do not be funny in your headline or try not to be funny in your headline.
Mhm.
That is not the purpose. The purpose of the headline is to
Information.
build up your you know build up the context for your joke. How do you set up an angle and then punchlines, and then also then how do you rewrite jokes? So your first version is always going to be very 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 rickety, and
Uh-huh.
then how do you rewrite it where it goes, all right, don't forget to put the key piece of the headline towards the end of the first line, end on your joke. All those kind of like conceptual things. I think there's a lot of overlap between monologue joke writing and stand up. I think where it starts to diverge a little bit is writing for voice is one, and then two, there's a
Mhm.
lot of different types of segments that late night shows have that I think stand up doesn't necessarily have. When you're
Yeah.
doing field pieces and desk bits,
Yeah.
thinking through how do I create a desk bit and the concept of something that's refillable and recurring. I
Mhm.
don't I don't know enough about stand up. The only thing that comes to mind is like Bill Engvall, here's your sign.
Or yeah, that's a great example. Or you might be a redneck,
Exactly.
like a consistent, basically like a consistently repeatable thing. Like, or my favorite one is a closer look on Seth Meyers. Like, I love
Exactly. The
that rephrasing.
long form
Yeah.
rants, things like that. Again, the long form rants go down to like what's the voice and what's the tone and what's your point of view, and that's not a stand to me. That's not a stand up bit. That's also still just a longer form of comedy news where you're doing information, joke,
Yep.
information. It's a vehicle to also provide like point of view.
Mm-hmm.
But I think building something that's easily refillable. Like those are hard things to do. It's like easy when you see it, and if I give you one and I say write jokes for it, most
Mm-hmm.
anyone, if you have a stand up background or a late night background, you could probably fill.
Adapt.
You can probably if I asked you to write a bunch of Thank You Notes by Jimmy Fallon, you could probably everyone who has some comedy writing experience
Uh-huh. Oh yeah,
could
yeah. No,
probably
no.
rip through them.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the difference is how do you build those formats and how do you build those templates, and working through that is kind of a key difference. And then when you're doing late night writing, you're more times than not going to be writing for a show or writing for yourself or for a host. So
Right.
writing towards voice is a really key part of it, and that's something as the program goes, I have a very lofty vision of what I think this looks like long term. Right now, we're just at the phase where we're doing a workshop. We're working on some monologue, jokes, and despots, getting those fundamentals nailed down. But there's a lot of opportunity to say, okay, how do I start to write for my voice? How do I write for other people's voice? How do I build the tone of a show? Because my goal is not to, like, I can't offer the opportunity to write on an existing late night show or tell you how to do that or how to get onto it. I have none of those experiences. But what my goal is how do I give you the tools and resources and support in conjunction with, the Pit or whatever other comedy institute that we go through, and how do we give you all the tools and resources to be able to start to build your own show and your own content? I think there's space for that in the city. I know there are a couple of late night style shows already. I think there's a lot of cool runway either virtually or in person where you can start to build that. And the key is in learning from experience, but the key is don't replicate what already exists. You can do it, but from an audience point of view, why am I going to go see just another version of Late Night with Seth Meyers? What I want to see is your interpretation of that comes through your lens, that comes from your point of view, that comes from something you care about, whether it's a sports talk show, whether it's a show that's grounded in baking and like it's a late night show about baking at a kitchen. Like, you're taking those tools and then my hope and dream is that folks take those and they start to build it around their own. Think about like the Chris Gethard show. That's a late night show.
Yeah.
It's just completely flipped around and through his own point of view, and it works, and people go see that. So that's like, I think that's going to be a really fun, hopefully differentiator and something that people can really take out of this program. If, knock on wood, we'll see how it goes. But that's kind of part of the vision is once you get through, like, in that first level, you're going to be learning a lot of the skills of just what is a desk bit, how do you build it, what is a field piece, what is a monologue joke, how do you edit it, joke ordering, brainstorming, things like that, pitching your ideas and selling your ideas, which is a huge part as well. Because when you're doing a show, you have to explain what this idea in your head is for your despot, and like it's going to be the first time people are conceptualizing it. So how do you properly pitch and distill that information and make it really clear and communicable? I think that's kind of missing in a lot of writing classes too. So I'm really excited to build a segment and module on that, and working really those muscles, because I think that's really important if it's something you're interested in doing. So, and then moving at once you have those skills, finding voice and writing for voice. So then you're doing your late night rant, your closer looks, things like that. You're doing characters walk on segments, writer walk on segments. Your Amber and Telly, or your Amber and Jenny.
Jokes Seth can't
tell with Amber and Jenny. I saw a really fun sketch where there was like a writer walk on sketch and things like that. So now you're trying to like write for specific purposes and people and through your own lens, and then building that into like, all right, cool. Now you have all these tools and you know how to make them your own. How do you then turn that into a show that you're really interested and exciting about? So that's long term, but that's kind of like, I think you start to see those differences between stand up and I don't know enough about stand up, but to me those are some of the key differences where you're building towards like more of a box collaborative show as opposed to building towards your own special or building towards your own tour.
Yeah, I just had that idea, like basically like a collaborative. It's basically a collaborative joke showcase.
Yeah.
In a low way. I had this as you were talking. I kept picturing like everybody like in the workshop, like picking an idea for a show to do, and then everyone working on it.
Yeah.
And then I saw the grad show happen from my place in the booth.
I have that too, where it's like it's building those steps that are exciting and palatable, and I think that's been the joy of figuring this thing out, is like, how do you get there? Because I think so many classes and programs in this world, because I've done a good amount of them, I've talked to people who've done a lot of these shows, is you do like a 6-week workshop and it's like, we did everything we possibly could. I hope you had fun and see you later.
Yeah.
It's just like, I didn't even learn how to write a field piece or know what that is. And now I have this packet submission and I don't know what the hell to do with this. So I'm kind of excited about that too. And it's been fun to think through all these things, because it also is a nice reminder of like what I like about it. because when you're trying to crank out a bunch of jokes in time for a show and it's 1 week before the show and you just got to rip through them. When it rains, it pours. Sometimes I have a really good day and I really love monologue jokes, and some days I freaking hate them. And I blame the news, and I'm like, why aren't people doing things that are interesting? But
right.
Going back to some of those like just very technical things of like, hey, here's 6 different ways you can build a punchline. Here's 8 ways you can rewrite them, and there's a lot of quote unquote science to it too that helps with the creativity as well.
That's very cool. Well, I'm excited for you because one of my favorite things I've done in relation to taking a show like on is that one desk bit I did with you.
Yeah.
If you remember that one, and I love like the joke writing aspect of this. Like I very much pay attention. Like I pay attention to the whole show, obviously, because I got cues and stuff.
That's a good answer.
But I love the no, I love the joke writing, the setup punch stuff. Those are the ones that I get up there and I'm like, I want to get up there and trade jokes back and forth with.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to audit one of these workshops one of these days, because I would be. That sounds. I like what you're setting up, and I'm really I'm excited to see how it goes, and I'm just because I didn't know that you were like maybe we're gonna walk away at some point. So I'm glad you did. I'm glad you didn't.
Yeah, it came together. It was a little touch and go for a while, especially post COVID, but it was a very good decision to come back. There's a lot of good things that have come out of returning.
That's very great to hear, man. And I like spending time with my friend, making funny things happen. So, dude, I really appreciate you coming back. I'll have you back on it again soon, because I feel like we're just starting the first of many things that we're gonna like start working on. So I feel like this is the beginning of that.
There's a lot of fun things coming up. I'm optimistic about the things that will come up, I should say.
Yes, and let's do some plugs. So you've got your late night writing workshop at the Pit, and then Backdoor Barbecue, entering our 7th year. We're doing a show in April, and then I'm not gonna be here for this one, but then our next show's in June.
Yeah, so we'll be back April 20th and the 22nd. That's 7 and 9 p.m. respectively, and then June 22nd and 24th at the Pit. A little Thursday, if you're there for a weekday time, and then if you're here for the weekend, we got Saturdays on both. We're just working out some of the casting for April, but it's looking really good, and we got some fun themes, and we also have some cool directors and potential performers lined up for June. So keep posted.
Very exciting. Thank you again, man. Great to see you as always.
Yeah, of course.
I know you've been on here before, but always like getting to chat with you, man. So thanks again for doing this.
Of course, always happy to come through.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's me and Mike Brian Fogerty. I like this idea of like workshopping ideas I've had on the podcast, so maybe I can do more of that, and maybe you definitely want to do more of that with Mike in the future. So, folks, I appreciate you all listening. Keep an eye out on thepitnyc.com for Backdoor Barbecue's upcoming shows. We'll have a show in April, and then there will be a show in June. I will be out of town, unfortunately, but you should still come through for that, because the show is always funny, and I love working with my friends. It's been real joy to get to do that for this long now. So thank you all again so much for being here. That is our show for today. If you enjoyed this and think you know a friend who would be interested in this podcast as well, you can send them to awesomedisaster.com. That has links to everything related to me. You can listen to the show on Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. If you want to give us a follow and share some links, that'll please our algorithmic overlords. I'm on Twitter at ComicWillCarry, at WillCarry23 on Instagram. A lot of travel photos, food, and podcast stuff. And occasionally pictures of me at soccer matches, because that's what I do as well. And if you want to go a little bit further in support of the show, you can go to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/awesomedisaster. You can also check out our merch shop as well also at awesomedisaster.com. And I appreciate all of you folks being here, and appreciate all of you listening to me opine about not being able to get on some roller coasters. That is the epitome of a luxury problem. This is a very luxury problem, the roller coaster issue. But it's just it's smarted in the moment. So I'll incorporate it into my life going forward as we get into the summer here. So thank you all again so much for being here. I have been awake for a very long time, so I am going to eat and fall asleep. Then I'm going to do some tech for some shows at the Pit, which is what I like, one of the many things I enjoy to do. And I will see you folks very soon. I appreciate you all being here, and I'll catch you next week between Awesome and Disaster. Stay safe, get vaxxed and boosted, and stomp out fascism. Take care, everybody.